Back to Hillary, she did need to distract from that email scandal, which was around her neck like an albatross. You know, the whole, oh, she has a hat she's tweeted herself out wearing, but her email.
They thought her armor was unbreakable. For decades, Hillary Clinton walked through politics like a queen who believed the crown was already hers. She carried herself with the weight of inevitability, as if no scandal, no misstep, no opposition could ever take her down. But then came a clash on live television that felt less like an interview and more like a heavyweight fight.
Clinton has a very weird and I think shitty marriage. I don't think she has a husband who is in love with her or faithful to her, and I think I can't really blame him because she seems to have accepted this behavior since the inception of their marriage. And so past his prologue, you're going to get what you tolerate. You know, what you permit, you promote. She spent all of her daughter's upbringing away, at work, at the law firm, in the White House, running for office.
Every question wasn't just a poke, it was a punch, cutting through the image she spent years building. Her history of power, survival, and control suddenly looked fragile. And that's what made the moment so electric, the exposure of cracks no one was supposed to see. Instead of playing it safe, her opponent went right for the jugular. All the polished smiles and perfectly rehearsed lines weren't enough to shield Hillary this time. One by one, the stories she had spent decades shaping into myths of strength and leadership were stripped apart. This wasn't about polite political debate, it was about tearing away the mask and revealing what lay beneath. Watching it unfold was like watching a castle collapse under the weight of its own secrets. By the way, before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and share more intriguing stories. Now, let's continue. Because once that first crack appeared, the hits kept coming. And the story only got darker, more personal, and far more scandalous than anyone expected. Hillary Clinton's public image has always been guarded, but when the conversation shifted toward her marriage, the shield cracked even more. For years, whispers followed the Clintons' rumors of betrayal, infidelity, and a union that looked more like a political contract than a love story. On live television, those whispers were dragged into the spotlight. The claim was blunt. Hillary didn't have a husband who was faithful or truly in love with her, and the shocking part was that she seemed to accept it. From the beginning, she tolerated the behavior.
Like full screen grabs of the Russian memos that the Dutch got their hands on and leaked to us, where the Russians are recounting exactly what they saw Leonard discussing about this Hillary Clinton fan and emissary, Julianne Smith, and how they were going to stop Trump, undermine Trump, but most importantly, distract from Hillary's email scandal,
allowing it to define the foundation of their relationship. This wasn't just about gossip, it was about what that acceptance said about her character. If someone tolerates lies and betrayal in their personal life, what does that mean when they step onto the political stage? The connection was clear. What you permit, you promote. And Hillary promoted it by staying silent, by looking the other way, by building her career on a partnership that was less about love and more about survival. Even her role as a mother was brought into question. Instead of being present during her daughter's upbringing, she was constantly on the move, working late at the law firm, making appearances at the White House, running campaigns. It painted a picture not of sacrifice for family, but of sacrifice of family, all in pursuit of ambition. This attack went straight to the heart of her personal life, ripping away the idea of Hillary as the strong wife and nurturing mother. It left an image of a woman who always put power above everything else. Hillary's rise in politics was always sold as destiny. From the earliest days of her career, the message was clear. She wasn't just another politician, she was the inevitable one. Every campaign, every stage appearance, every carefully planned speech carried the same undertone sooner or later. History itself would bend to make her president. But when the spotlight turned harsh, that inevitability looked less like destiny all this, and back more like
Hillary.
Arrogance.
You know, the whole, oh, she has a hat she's tweeted herself out wearing, but her emails. She's tried to turn it into this ridiculous joke, like, oh, but the moon landing, like you nutcases who are still railing about this made-up scandal, this thing that, you know, you've used to try to unfairly tar me. She did need to distract from that email scandal, which was around her neck like an albatross. Trust me, we were covering it every night on the Kelly File at Fox News. She had clearly violated the law with that homebrew server that had been accessed by foreign agents. She compromised national intelligence information. She did things she would never have allowed anybody at the State Department to do under her.
The narrative of being the safe pair of hands, the seasoned stateswoman, was ripped apart. Her longevity in politics wasn't framed as proof of unmatched skill or leadership. Instead, it was described as a sign of how deeply the system protects its own. Time and again, scandals swirled around her, and yet she survived not because she fixed them, not because she rose above them, but because her connections were powerful enough to shield her. The critique was sharp. Hillary didn't thrive on results, she thrived on survival. She wasn't climbing because the people demanded her leadership. She was climbing because her network of influence made sure she never fell too far, no matter how heavy the scandal. That air of inevitability, the sense that everyone simply owed her their trust, became her greatest weakness. It wasn't inspiration, it was entitlement. And the more that image cracked, the more people began asking the one question she never wanted to face. Where were the real results hiding after all those years in power? Then came the scandal that never seems to go away, the emails. The story of that private server has been called everything from a mistake to a crime, but on this stage it was laid out in brutal detail. A homebrewed server sitting in her basement, filled with classified information, wide open to foreign agents. It wasn't just sloppy, it was reckless. Rules that every other State Department employee had to follow didn't apply to Hillary. She carved out her own path, even if it put national security at risk. And when the scandal broke, instead of facing it, she tried to turn it into a punchline. She wore a hat, tweeted jokes like, "but her emails," and mocked anyone still asking questions as if they were conspiracy nuts. But behind the humor was fear.
Hillary Clinton, of course, is the original election denier. I'm sure you voted for her in 2016.
Well, she's not an election denier.
She absolutely was the OG election denier.
First of all, she came out before the sun had risen to concede the election to Trump.
And then spent the next 4 years saying he was illegitimate. He was an illegitimate president.
Okay, well, first of all, she didn't say he was an illegitimate.
Yes, she did.
You tell me exactly what she said.
She said those exact words repeatedly.
Because that server had been accessed, because it had compromised sensitive intelligence, and because it violated the very laws she herself once enforced. The most damning part, the claim that when the email storm threatened to sink her, she needed a distraction. And that's when the story of Trump and Russia took center stage. The accusation was clear. Hillary wasn't just defending herself, she was redirecting the fire. Create a new scandal, pointed at the opponent, and suddenly her own mistakes fade into the background. It was strategy, it was cold, and it worked at least for a while. But the email controversy never disappeared, and no amount of jokes could erase the seriousness of what she had done. The blows didn't stop there. Another explosive point came with the claim that Hillary Clinton was the original election denier. After the shock of losing in 2016, she did step forward quickly to concede on camera, but what followed told a different story. For years after, she repeatedly labeled Donald Trump an illegitimate president. She insisted that foreign interference, misinformation, and corruption had stolen what should have been her victory. It wasn't just disappointment, it was a full narrative designed to undercut Trump's presidency. While the media often paints her as the responsible adult who gracefully accepted defeat, the reality was far messier. Every interview, every appearance, every book tour carried the same undertone that she was robbed. And unlike Trump, who faced massive backlash for his refusal to accept results, Hillary's words were often cushioned, softened, or brushed aside by sympathetic coverage.
And that leaves me back to Schellenberger here. This is page 4 of his report. He writes as follows: the Russian reports, again, that the Dutch spied on, that we got our hands on, also claimed, and listen to this, I mean, you probably already know this stuff, Glenn, but claimed that Attorney General Loretta Lynch, okay, this is back in 2016, people, remember, Obama's president, Loretta Lynch is his Attorney General, and her DOJ/FBI are investigating the Hillary Clinton email scandal. And also now we learn simultaneously working with the Hillary Clinton campaign to bury that scandal in favor of calling Trump a Russian agent.
The attack against her was precise. If denying the outcome of an election is so dangerous, why was Hillary celebrated while doing the very same thing? She conceded publicly, yes, but then spent 4 years repeating the line that her opponent wasn't legitimate. That contradiction cut deep. It turned her into the very thing she once accused others of being. For critics, it wasn't just hypocrisy, it was proof that her public persona as a defender of democracy was nothing more than another mask. Surviving scandal after scandal had become Hillary's trademark. Whitewater, Benghazi, the email server, the Clinton Foundation, each one could have ended a political career, but for her, it never did. Instead of answering for the damage, she found a way to pivot. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Step out of one burning building and straight into the next photo op. Rather than confronting the controversies head-on, she mastered the art of distraction. New speeches, new campaigns, new appearances, anything to shift the conversation before the flames caught up. It was less about cleaning up the mess and more about outrunning it. And the system seemed to let her get away with it every time. Powerful allies, a friendly media, and the sheer force of her influence made her almost untouchable. The argument wasn't that she survived because of strength, it was that she survived because of protection. Each scandal was supposed to be fatal, but she slipped through the cracks again and again. This wasn't resilience, it was calculation.
Okay. I mean, she conceded the election. Whether you're interpreting her disappointment at losing it as the same thing as Trump not conceding it, I don't know if that's where you're getting it from. But again, it's a tremendous false equivalency. You could ask Hillary Clinton right now who won that election. She will tell you Donald Trump won the election.
Now she knows she has to because of what Trump has done.
A politician who had learned that as long as she kept moving forward, as long as she never stopped to admit fault, the past couldn't catch her. The truth was buried beneath a mountain of new headlines, and the public was expected to simply move on. For critics, it wasn't skill or brilliance keeping her afloat. It was a system rigged to keep her safe as long as she remained useful. And then came the charge of hypocrisy. Hillary had spent years shaping herself as the voice of the people, the champion of the working class, the fighter for those without power. But when you looked behind the curtain, the picture didn't match the speech. Her donor lists weren't filled with factory workers or small business owners. They were stacked with Wall Street executives, foreign leaders with shady records, and billionaires who wrote checks big enough to buy influence. She spoke about standing up for everyday Americans, but the company she kept told a different story. Fancy galas, private fundraisers, exclusive dinners, rooms where the average voter could never step foot. It was the kind of inner circle that lived far above the struggles of the people she claimed to represent. And when critics pointed this out, her defenders waved it away as just part of the political game. But the hypocrisy was glaring. How can someone present themselves as the fighter for the common man while being bankrolled by the very elites holding those people down? It wasn't just contradiction, it was betrayal. Her words and her actions couldn't coexist, and when pressed under the spotlight, the mask of the people's champion fell apart. For many, it became undeniable. Hillary Clinton wasn't leading a grassroots movement. She was playing the oldest game in politics, siding with power while selling the illusion of empathy. Every few years, Hillary seemed to roll out a new version of herself. One moment, she was the warm grandmother baking cookies. The next, she was the fearless stateswoman commanding the world stage. Sometimes she tried on the role of relatable neighbor, other times the no-nonsense boss ready to lead the nation. But the problem was always the same. None of it felt real. Every rebranding came with a new wardrobe, new tone, new rehearsed laugh, and a set of speeches fine-tuned to sound spontaneous. But underneath the costume changes, it was always the same Hillary, the same calculated pauses in her speeches, the same phrases tested by focus groups, the same attempt to appear authentic while everything about it was staged. It was less evolution and more like watching an actor swap roles without ever leaving the same play. Authenticity can't be scheduled between donor luncheons, and that's what made the image crumble. People saw through the performance. What was meant to feel natural ended up feeling like a Broadway rehearsal, complete with scripted emotional cues. Smile here, laugh there, pretend to look casual while the cameras are rolling. It was all too polished, too perfect, and too empty. Instead of connecting her to the public, every reinvention only reminded them how carefully she was trying to manage her image. And in politics, nothing kills trust faster than looking like you're always performing. The fire grew hotter when the conversation turned to her version of feminism. On the surface, Hillary always branded herself as a trailblazer for women, a living symbol of progress. But under the microscope, that image looked less like empowerment and more like protection for herself. Every criticism, no matter how legitimate, could be repackaged as sexism. If someone questioned her policies, her scandals, or her judgment, it was framed as an attack on all women. This wasn't feminism for the people, it was feminism as a shield. Instead of lifting others, it tied the cause so tightly to her own image that supporting women became synonymous with supporting Hillary. And if you didn't, you were branded as part of the problem. That tactic made it nearly impossible to separate the movement from the politician, which critics argued was manipulative at its core. Then there was the arrogance woven into her campaigns. Time and again, she ran for office as if the presidency was already hers, as if the voters' only role was to show up and confirm what she believed was destiny. Rather than inspiring the nation, she leaned on inevitability. She wasn't telling people she could win, she was telling them she should win. And when the results didn't go her way, the blame was never placed on her strategy or her message. Instead, it was painted as a mistake by the country, as if the people had failed her. It was entitlement disguised as leadership, and it left a sour taste for many who once believed in her message. The spotlight then turned to the Clinton Foundation, often described as her soft underbelly. On paper, it was supposed to be about charity, about helping people around the world. But critics saw something else, an access machine dressed up as philanthropy. Donors with deep pockets, including foreign governments and powerful corporations, poured in millions. And in return, they seemed to get more than a tax write-off. They got proximity to one of the most influential political families in America. The speeches about transparency and integrity didn't match what was happening behind the scenes. The lines between charity and politics blurred until they practically disappeared. Was it a foundation built to change lives, or a vehicle to keep power and influence alive even when Hillary wasn't in office? That was the question Kelly hammered home. It wasn't just about money, it was about timing. The foundation thrived when Hillary was Secretary of State and when she was running for president. The flow of donations looked less like random generosity and more like investments made with expectations attached. Critics called it pay to play, and the perception stuck. Instead of being remembered as a symbol of good works, the Clinton Foundation became shorthand for corruption disguised as charity. The more people dug, the harder it became to separate the good intentions from the political advantages. In the end, it looked less like philanthropy and more like politics in a different suit. Even after leaving office, Hillary never really left the stage. The lucrative speaking tours, the book deals, the constant appearances on television, every move kept her in the spotlight without the weight of holding power. It wasn't public service anymore, it was self-preservation. She became a permanent fixture in American politics, not because the people demanded it, but because she refused to step aside. Her public reinventions became almost comedic. One year, she was the grandmother next door, sharing cookie recipes. The next, she was the fearless global leader, commanding debate stages like a character in a political drama. Coffee shop drop-ins, awkward laughing fits, over-rehearsed candid moments, it all felt staged, like someone was holding up cue cards just out of frame. Smile now, look relatable, pretend to be authentic. But no matter how many times she tried to refresh her image, the same cracks showed through. Vague answers, selective memory, reworked history every opportunity to explain herself ended up as another round of evasions. The scandals didn't fade, they lingered like shadows she couldn't outrun. And instead of accountability, she leaned on the victim narrative, turning criticism into proof of persecution. What made it sting even more was the double standard. Trump, once in power, never moved against her criminally. Yet the moment he left office, the same system she had relied on went after him with full force. For critics, it wasn't just politics, it was proof of a game rigged to protect her while punishing others. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments. See you on the next one!